That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
I think that was Neil's quote. I didn't understand it.
No, one small step for man, but I didn't get the second phrase.
Guys, you see it? Michael, do you see it?
Yeah.
That's the space shuttle going up.
At the start of this year, my dad encoded some of our old home videos to be stored and watched digitally. He sent me our 1997 trip to Disney World. I used some of that footage in another video. And while we were in Epcot's World Pavilion, in the Canada Pavilion specifically, he got this shot. It's the launch, from nearby Cape Canaveral, of the space shuttle Columbia, part of NASA's now defunct Space Lab missions.
What?
Does that spaceship have people in it?
Yeah, oh yes. It's got a crew of 7 or 8.
Are they going to try and land on
Yes,
Mars?
yeah, they're leaning right back into the chairs right about now.
Or... No, they're not.
Guys, are you watching this?
I remember me and my brother being amazed by it. And at a certain point, I stopped being able to see the ship.
They're not going to Mars yet. Well, they're going to be out of sight.
Not the most exciting footage of a rocket launch, I know. Doesn't compare to this.
It feels just like it sounds.
Of course, this was actually shot by NASA themselves.
I got a pitch and a roll program, and this baby is really going.
And the voiceover is from an actual astronaut.
The moment there, just a supreme elation, complete release of tensions. To feel all that power precisely directed, know that we're on course, first of all, for Earth orbit, and then precisely inserted onto the right orbit, right trajectory for rendezvous with the moon.
For All Mankind is a show on some... Is it Apple? Is it Apple Prime? Whatever. No, who cares? For All Mankind is a documentary released in 1989 by Al Reinert, and it could arguably hold the title of the first feature film to be shot on another celestial body. Because this film was painstakingly assembled from the footage shot by the Apollo program, remastered, and backed by excerpts from hundreds of hours of tape interviewing the men who went to the moon and back. And they were all men. I mean, for mankind, it's right there. But it's not a straight historical retelling. No dates are given, no timeline, no talking heads reminiscing. The film doesn't tell the story of the Apollo program. It isn't split into chapters, each detailing individual Apollo missions, but rather, the journey is told all at once, from launch to landing and back. The voices of the men intermingle, collectively conveying the unique experience of going to another world and back. Backed with a dreamy electronic score by Brian Eno. The result is a space-age travelogue, giving the viewer a sense of what it must have felt like to make that journey. A journey few have made, and likely few will make again. In his essay for the Criterion release of the film, director Al Reinert called For All Mankind the first-hand story of a great mythic adventure. Touching the Moon was, by definition, a work of inspired imagination and high art, and scarcely requires further embellishment. It speaks for itself more eloquently than it can ever be interpreted, an age-old dream that at long last was fulfilled. Hey, that's cool, but did Stanley Kubrick do a director's commentary? I am preempting the inevitable conspiracy theory comments. Please do not talk about them in the comments, or I will Buzz Aldrin you metaphorically. Okay, yes, I also know about the conspiracy theory saying that the moon landing was faked by the US government on a soundstage with Stanley Kubrick directing, and yes, there are plenty of ways to debunk that conspiracy theory. For one, there are far too many people involved in the project to possibly keep a secret that big silent. For another, the Soviet Union, who had every reason to undermine their rival's claim, never challenged the Apollo mission's success. And yes, Adam Ruins Everything did that one episode where they talked about how it was impossible to fake a moon landing with 1960s filmmaking technology.
Fake moon landing, take one.
All right, in this scene, you're on the moon, and it's real, and we're fooling America, and action!
But for me, the biggest hole in the theory is, well, I'm sorry, is Kubrick a joke to you all? Do you really think Kubrick would have framed a shot like this? Really? We taught you better than that. No, but actually my favorite cinephilic joke about the moon landing is that you know Kubrick didn't fake it because he never would have let Armstrong flub his line.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
What the hell was that, Neil? The hell was that? Spit the moon dust out of your mouth, get back up the ladder, take 128!
See, it's funny because all auteur filmmakers are abusive. Ha 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 ha. That was really hard on my throat. Still, there is a kind of poetic logic to the conspiracy theories that this was only special effects. After all, one of the earliest special effects films was about landing on the moon. But of course, George Méliès wasn't trying to be scientifically accurate. He was drawing from Jules Verne and H.G. Wells. This is theatrical, a fantasy. Méliès was trying to dream a lunar landing, not fake it.
By the grace of God, and the name of the United States of America, I take possession of this planet on behalf of and for the benefit of all mankind.
This film does try to fake a lunar landing, shooting in a studio. And the results are less than realistic.
Brady, cut that out!
And even 2001, whose effects by Douglas Trumbull were so cutting edge that conspiracy theorists latched Kubrick's name to their theories, which is really unfair to Trumbull, don't have the same qualities as the footage shown here. Actually shooting a figure on a moonscape, with the grace of movement in low gravity and the glow of all-encompassing moonlight, is so much stranger, so more genuinely alien in the truest sense of the word, that suggesting it could have been faked by Hollywood isn't just disrespectful to the astronauts, it gives way too much credit to Hollywood.
Of course, you need to be absolutely certain that in all that splicing and printing and transferring, none of the most common film artifacts have gotten onto your giant print.
But if you want a deep dive into the cinematic reasons why the moon landing couldn't have been faked, check out this incredibly dry interview with filmmaker S.G. Collins on YouTube channel Video from Space, explaining why, as strange as it sounds, in 1969 it was harder to fake a moon landing than to actually do it.
Only those later missions, you have to play back at 30 FPS, meaning you have to shoot at like 60 FPS, twice the torque, twice as many splices to keep clean, twice as much of a chance that the film's going to break in the camera. You think maybe it would be easier to just go to the moon?
The truth of it is, the only way you can get this look is by shooting on location. And the story of how people got these shots is a very well-known one. So, wanna fake a moon landing? On a clear morning, at 9:32 a.m., the 16th of July, 1969, technicians at the National Aeronautics and Space Administration initiated the launch of the Saturn V rocket from Kennedy Space Center's Launch Complex 39A, igniting the fuel that would propel astronauts Neil Alden Armstrong, Edwin Eugene Buzz Aldrin, and Michael, no middle name, Collins, into the air. Once the fuel in the S-1C stage was spent, the S-1C detached, allowing the fuel in the S-2 to ignite, before itself detaching and letting the rocket in the S-4B stage ignite, starting the crew's 3-day journey to the moon. After 30 minutes, Collins performed a complex maneuver called transposition, docking, and extraction, in which the command module, separated from the spent S-4B, turned around and connected itself to the lunar module, nestled in its adapter housing. Seamless. Entering lunar orbit, Armstrong and Aldrin entered the lunar module Eagle, leaving Collins to pilot the command module Columbia, and the two modules separated. The Eagle descended to a safe landing site. Earlier probes had picked a landing spot within the Mare Tranquillitatis, or Sea of Tranquility. The Eagle made contact with the lunar surface on Sunday, July 20th, at which Armstrong radioed back, "This is Tranquility Base, the Eagle has landed." After 3.5 hours of getting their extravehicular mobility units on, the cabin was depressurized. Armstrong exited the lunar module first. Upon descending, he pulled a D-ring that opened the Modularized Equipment Stowage Assembly, or MESA, a panel which was used as storage space for specialized lunar surface equipment, as well as a slow-scan television camera, which began automatically transmitting the image of Armstrong's descent back to Earth. Armstrong reached the bottom of the ladder and stepped off, famously declaring that it was one small step for a man, one giant leap for... After saying the famous thing, Armstrong uncovered a plaque on the lunar lander with an inscription saying that men from Earth came in peace for all mankind, bearing the signatures of Armstrong, Aldrin, Collins, and the, let's say, fourth most evil American president? Aldrin then descended, and the two proceeded to take photographs of themselves and the lunar landscape with two 16 Mauer motion picture film cameras, 3 Hasselblad 500 EL cameras, and a Kodak stereo close-up camera to photograph lunar soil. They collected mineral samples and placed upon the moon the Lunar Laser Ranging Experiment, a device covered in retroreflectors which allow anyone on Earth to transmit a laser pulse towards it, which are then reflected back to Earth, allowing for the calculation of the distance between the surface of the Earth and the moon, and also definite proof that anyone can prove for themselves at home with the right equipment that humankind has been to the moon and back. Also, they put a flag there. Aldrin and Armstrong returned to the Eagle, rested for 7 hours, repressurized the cabin, then fired the Eagle's engines, detaching the cockpit from the landing section, sending the two men back into lunar orbit. And also, knocking the flag over. The Eagle rendezvoused with the Columbia on July 21st, reuniting Collins with Aldrin and Armstrong. Taking another 3-day journey back to Earth, the lunar module was ejected. Upon entering Earth orbit, the engine for the Columbia was detached, revealing the Columbia's heat shield. The heat shield protected the crew from the temperatures of re-entry, and the Columbia splashed down on July 24th, 2,660 kilometers east of Wake Island in the Pacific Ocean. The crew activated flotation bags and were picked up by the USS Hornet and brought back to the mainland. Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins were greeted as heroes and taken to the Capitol in Washington, D.C., where they were given the thanks of a grateful nation and the gift of real hair, and a meeting with America's sweethearts, the Thompsons, as well as a brand new Batmobile. But uh-oh, what fiendishness is this? It's the Nose, and his best friend, the man who jokes. Tee-hee-hee, we're cinema now! Oh, how dastardly, go get him, I guess this is Daryl from Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. Anyway, pew, 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 pew. Oh, what madness! The crowds are panicking! Let's go to President Shakespeare for his remarks! Oh, awful things our astronauts have faced! What sayest thou, Secretary of the Treasury McDuck? Och, I dinna ken! I'm a waterfowl who bathes in currency! I bought a lot of Legos in quarantine. Anyway, that story only covers all the dull mechanics of getting to the moon and back, all the technical aspects, all the fun toys. And yes, the engineering and scientific feat of bringing humans to the moon and back are impressive, but dry. There's no human aspect. We've been focusing on the moon, rather than the men. This is where the film comes in. Reiner does a fine job putting the people who went on these missions first, and emphasizes that not only were the Apollo astronauts the first people on the moon, they were also the first filmmakers. And as filmmakers, they were storytellers, documentarians. They were there to document their experiences. Space vlogs.
They're gonna put me in the movies. They're gonna make a big star out of me.
The astronauts brought cameras with them. The simple handheld Hasselblads first brought into space by Wally Schirra, an amateur photographer, and one of the Mercury 7, the first members of NASA's first venture into space. Hasselblad still sells itself as the camera that made it to the moon. The astronauts brought music, classical and country, like this theme-appropriate hit by Buck Owens and the Buckaroos.
All I gotta do is act naturally. By the way, gang, you know we're making this tape, and they're going to the moon. They're on the way to the moon right now.
Other artists brought to the mission and included in the film include Frank Sinatra, Hector Berlioz, and Merle Haggard, who recorded custom tracks for Apollo 16.
My name is Merle Haggard, and this is my band, The Strangers, and And I hope that we will be able to do something you'll enjoy hearing on your way to the moon.
Their music choices are a good reminder that despite the constant rhetoric of going to the moon for all mankind, they were still white, male, straight Americans, still people from a specific time and place and culture, and for a reason. The US government wanted to make sure that spacemen spoke with an American accent, that they planted an American flag, that the moon would be an outpost for American culture.
And here comes the Botsy twins.
Okay, I have to ask, who in holy hell are the Bobbsey twins? I've heard that name all my life and I have no clue what the hell they are. Like, they're twins. Like, my baby boomer parents used to call me and my little brother the Bobbsey twins all the time because we looked a lot alike as babies, and the astronauts here are clearly joking about how they have the same spacesuits on, but was there ever like a Bobbsey twin fandom? Is there Bobbsey twin lore? What do they do besides be twins?
And here comes the Botsy twins.
Is this the first dated pop culture reference on the moon? Anyway, looking forward to future historians studying the footage of the next moon landing and wondering why, for no clear reason, one astronaut put a gun to the back of the other astronaut's head and said, "Always has been. This joke will be dated in a month, guaranteed."
Well, in my left hand I have a feather. In my right hand a hammer. And I guess one of the reasons we got here today was because of a gentleman named Galileo a long time ago who made a rather significant discovery about falling objects in gravity fields. And we thought that where would be a better place to confirm his findings than on the moon. And I'll drop the two of them here, and hopefully they'll hit the ground at the same time. How about that? That proves that Mr. Galileo was correct in his findings.
It's rather strange to think of the Apollo astronauts as artists. Yes, they were pilots and scientists and engineers, but they were also a kind of artist, there to capture not only the surface of the moon, but themselves.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
It's a shame. The solar shield on Neil Armstrong's spacesuit prevented the camera from getting his reaction. I wonder what expression he had on his face when he made that one small step.
Giant leap for mankind.
The words "for mankind" were garbled. NASA logs show that Armstrong's heart rate was the highest it had been for the duration of the mission in these moments. That gold visor blocked his face, so I can't help but wonder, was he choking up, getting those words out? Was he crying? I wonder. And all I can do is wonder.
This is taken from Epcot Center.
Tomorrowland. Promise of things to come.
Walter Elias Disney had dreams of space, too. Ones that he never lived to see completed, but ones that he did live to advertise.
In this Tomorrowland series, we are combining the tools of our trade with the knowledge of the scientists to give a factual picture of the latest plans for man's newest adventure.
Disney, and pretty much all of post-war America, bought into space fever, caught up in the dream of tomorrow, even to the point of tolerating the work of certain, problematic people.
To help show you what is being done to solve these problems, we have called upon one of the foremost exponents of space travel, Dr. Wernher von Braun.
Wernher von Braun did a Disney special. Wernher von Braun did a Disney special. Wernher von Braun.
Gather round while I sing you of Wernher von Braun, a man whose allegiance is ruled by expedience. Call him a Nazi, he won't even frown. Nazi schmatzi, says Wernher von Braun.
For those who don't know, Wernher von Braun became a public figure after the Second World War when the United States government captured and drafted Nazi scientists to maintain a scientific edge against the Soviets in the infamous Operation Paperclip, something that was common knowledge and in fact made it into the greater popular culture of the time.
Strange look. What kind of name is that? That ain't no kraut name, is it, Sting? He changed it when he became a citizen. It used to be Merkwürdig.
And his contributions were far from minor. Von Braun is credited as the chief architect of the Saturn V rocket. The thing that I built out of Legos to demonstrate the moon landing. And yes, the Soviets snatched up Nazi scientists too, but as far as I know, the Soviets didn't give their Nazi scientists spreads in popular magazines, which von Braun had, and which likely led to his guest spot on this TV show, which you can watch right now on Disney+. It's
the thumbnail.
Dr. Werner von Braun, who is at present the chief of the Guided Missile Division of the Army's Rocket Center at Redstone Arsenal. He was also overall director of the development of the original V-2 rocket.
Hey, Walt, who did he make the rockets for? Who did he make the rockets for, Walt?
Don't say that he's hypocritical. Say rather that he's apolitical. Once the rockets are up, who cares where they come down? That's not my department, says Werner von Braun.
Reinert doesn't mention von Braun in the film. In his narrative, the American space race truly began with President Kennedy's more famous declaration.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Which is the narrative that most people use. A challenge for the betterment of all mankind, and yes, even that's not a perfect framing because it uses the gender term mankind, but still, even Kennedy's rhetoric is more progressive than von Braun's. In his space PR campaign, the former Nazi couldn't help but frame space travel not as exploration, but as conquest. Given now that science, at least in American culture, has been linked to progressivism and change and the only hope for the future of a livable planet, it's easy to forget that for the activists of the 60s, scientists were often seen as cold, unfeeling tools of the military-industrial complex. They were the ones bombing foreigners and spoiling the Earth. Fitting, then, that artists of the time worked to refocus on the human aspect of putting people on the moon.
I can't pay no doctor bills, but Whitey's on the moon. 10 years from now, I'll be paying still while Whitey's on the moon.
For Gil Scott-Heron, seeing the endless capital thrown into an impractical space program while President Johnson's Great Society fizzled out, the Apollo astronauts were cruel reminders of his own oppression.
Well, I was already giving him 50 a week, and now Whitey's on the moon.
The truth is, the moon landing had little, if any, direct effect on most Americans alive at the time. The moon landing was just a big, expensive show. And a boring one.
All the networks dumped us. One of them said we made going to the moon about as exciting as taking a trip to Pittsburgh.
But yeah, the Apollo missions had diminishing returns on them. We've been to the moon. Now what?
Houston, we have a problem.
As a kid, Apollo 13 played a lot in my household. The Ron Howard-directed retelling of the near-disastrous mission that almost cost the lives of 3 people was, to my kid mind, inspiring.
We never lost an American in space. We're sure as hell not going to lose one on my watch. Failure is not an option.
The film was a box office hit, winning 2 Academy Awards and getting 7 nominations, including for Best Adapted Screenplay for William Broyles Jr. and Al Reinert. Fittingly enough.
William Broyles Jr. and Al Reinert for Apollo...
Wait, that Reinert? I've been saying Reinert this whole time. Oh, God. Now it's too late to go back and re-record everything. Screw it. Reinert. The film ends hopefully, celebrating the heroics of the Apollo crew and by asking when we might return to the moon.
I sometimes catch myself looking up at the moon, remembering the changes of fortune in our long voyage, thinking of the thousands of people who worked to bring the 3 of us home. I look up at the moon and wonder, when will we be going back? And who will that be?
Well, since then, it feels like we've been afraid to.
Got a full container of helium-3 ready to roll.
Films after that seem to focus on the psychological effect that space travel has on people. Films like Duncan Jones' Moon.
How are things down there? You guys been to any good parties or anything? Oh, thanks for the football feed. It almost felt live and almost.
And again in Alfonso Cuarón's Gravity, a thriller where space is impossibly hostile.
I am focused only on the essential to the exclusion of all else. I will make only pragmatic decisions.
And in last year's Ad Astra, Brad Pitt's astronaut character is required before each mission to say this, to keep his mind whole.
I will not rely on anyone or anything. I will not be vulnerable to mistakes.
As a form of prayer.
Resting BPM 47. Submit.
It's like we expect the act of going to the moon and beyond to bring a form of madness. It's a belief with ancient roots. It goes back to werewolves, men who turn wild in the light of the moon. In the Greek of the Gospel of Matthew, the word Selenia Zomenus was used to describe people afflicted with epilepsy, named for Selene, Greek goddess of the moon. Those overcome by madness were said to be moonstruck. The Romans held the same belief. Moonstruck in Latin became lunaticus, and in modern English, lunatic. Even the concept of sending a human being beyond Earth, beyond everything that they know, has to seem like total madness.
Yeah, Kyle, can you see the dot?
White dot.
Can you see the white dot? It's up there.
No, I don't see it. I see it.
Follow the curve of the smoke up and then keep going. Keep going. It's up there.
The STS-83 launch that my dad captured ended up being cut short due to an issue with the fuel cell, and redone 4 months later with the same crew to perform the same experiments. Mundane, but for the astronauts, life-saving. Not adventurous, merely the patient work of scientific progress. But, yeah, it's hard not to ask myself, as someone in the vast majority of Earth's population who will never, ever see outer space, let's be realistic. The question remains, what did it all mean for the people on the ground? And what will come next?
Wow. If that does not inspire you, you are at the wrong event.
The future of space exploration, as it stands, feels like an impossible choice between a future led by this rich evil idiot, or this rich evil idiot.
And you know, I've always said that rich guys seem to like rockets.
Can't say that I'm too excited to be led into space by shallow, petty men hoarding resources for shallow, petty reasons, trying to make space their own.
We are going to have the Space Force. Our nation of pioneers still yearns to conquer the unknown. Because we are Americans and the future belongs totally to us.
Conquests. New frontiers. But of course, that's the reason we went the first time.
Man has taken his first great stride forward in the conquest of space. His next goal will be the exploration of the moon, then the planets, and the infinite universe beyond.
Easy to forget that the moon landing happened at the end of so many failed revolutions.
One of the things you got to stop and do, make sure, is to have fun, too. Because you're only probably going to come this way once.
I was strolling on the moon one day.
But watching the film For All Mankind, it's easy to forget the complicated reasons for going when you hear the childlike glee in the voices of these grown men.
Look at the size of that rock.
And it makes you hope that more people can have that experience. Going to the moon was always an act of utter madness, a desperate act, seemingly a pointless act. It was, by definition, lunacy. And yet, the beauty of that insane act was such that humanity could see itself from the outside. Once we actually reached space, the von Braun narrative of conquest was pushed aside. Von Braun and their ilk saw space as something that they could change. But the men who went taught us that it would be space that changed us.
You have to literally just pinch yourself and ask yourself the question silently, do you really know where you are at this point in time and space? and in reality and in existence. When you look out the window and you're looking back at the most beautiful star in the heavens, the most beautiful because it's the one we understand and we know it's we're home, it's humanity, it's people, family, love, life. And besides that, it is beautiful. You can see from pole to pole and across oceans and continents, and you can watch it turn and there's no strings holding it up. And it's moving in a blackness that is almost beyond conception.
The film came out in 1989, a year before the Voyager 1 space probe took the famous pale blue dot photograph, then the most distant image ever taken of planet Earth. Carl Sagan later wrote of the image, "It has been said that astronomy is a humbling and character-building experience. There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another, and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known." He may have been unwittingly summarizing the statements of the Apollo astronauts.
Everything that I know, my family and my possessions, my friends, my country, it's all down there on that little thing. And it's so insignificant to this great big vastness of space.
And now the great now what?
Kyle, if you look really hard, you'll see a white dot. I don't see a white dot. I don't see a white dot. You're not looking hard enough.
We went to the moon, and for what? Have we become kinder? Have we stopped looking outside ourselves and back upon ourselves? It's so difficult to imagine a world elsewhere. Yet, we still try. We are all lunatics now. I'd like to thank my dad for getting this shot, for looking outside the world and towards the stars. But, damn, after all this time, I still can't see the ship.
Fly me to the moon. Let me play up there with those stars. Let me see what life is like.
Level 310, 10 minutes after departure.
I'm Air 787, we're Lima Alpha for taxi.
Departure frequency will be 125.7. Squawk 2766, destination Alpha.
Right, after ship, it's Lima, India, November, Delta.
Okay, copy. The Lima, India, November, Delta. Thank you, man. That's not Bravo, Juliet, hold short of Zulu. I'm Air 787.
787 departure frequency 105 will be 1257.
257, thanks. Ground American 116, heavy out on November, Bravo, Alpha. 125.7, 276.